Once upon a time, in a small village nestled in the countryside, there was a grand Easter palace. It had been built by a wealthy nobleman as a gift to his wife, who was a great lover of all things Easter. The palace was said to be the most beautiful and magnificent structure in the whole region, with stunning stained glass windows, towering spires, and an enormous garden filled with blooming flowers. However, as time went on, the palace became a place of darkness and horror. Strange things began to happen within its walls, and many claimed that it was haunted by the ghosts of past inhabitants. People would hear unexplained whispers, doors would slam shut on their own, and eerie apparitions would appear in the halls at night. Despite the spooky reputation of the palace, there were still those who dared to venture inside. One group of friends, in particular, were determined to uncover the truth behind the haunting. They were a brave bunch, unafraid of anything that might stand in their way. As they made their way through the dark and winding corridors of the palace, they could feel the chill of the air and the weight of the spirits that seemed to be lurking around every corner. The deeper they went, the more they could sense that something was not right. Finally, they arrived at the grand ballroom, where a great feast had been prepared for the Easter celebration. The tables were covered with sumptuous food, and the room was filled with the scent of freshly baked bread and sweet cakes. But as they approached the feast, they could see that something was terribly wrong. The food on the tables was rotten and decayed, covered in mold and infested with maggots. The once beautiful stained glass windows were shattered and covered in cobwebs, and the garden outside was overgrown and unkempt. It was clear that the palace had been abandoned for years, left to rot and decay in the darkness. Suddenly, they heard a low growling sound coming from the shadows. They turned to see a ghastly figure emerge from the darkness, its eyes glowing red and its skin as white as a sheet. The figure let out a blood-curdling scream, and the group of friends turned and ran for their lives. As they emerged from the palace, gasping for breath and covered in sweat, they knew that they had encountered something truly terrifying. The Easter palace may have been beautiful once, but now it was a place of darkness and horror, a reminder of the terrifying power of the supernatural. And so, they made a promise to each other that they would never return to that haunted, creepy place again. As the group of friends fled from the Easter palace, their hearts pounding in their chests, they could still hear the terrifying screams of the ghostly figure echoing behind them. They stumbled through the overgrown garden, their feet sinking into the muddy ground, and finally emerged onto the main road. As they caught their breath, they looked back at the Easter palace and saw that it was now shrouded in an eerie mist. The once grand structure now looked like a dark, foreboding castle, a place of nightmares and terror. They knew that they had escaped with their lives, but the memory of what they had seen and heard would haunt them forever. In the days that followed, the group of friends couldn't stop thinking about the Easter palace and the ghostly figure that had chased them out. They knew that they had to do something to uncover the truth behind the haunting and put the spirits to rest once and for all. So, they began to research the history of the palace, speaking to local historians and digging through old records. What they discovered was shocking. The palace had a dark and tragic past, filled with murder, betrayal, and sorrow. It seemed that the spirits of the past inhabitants had never been able to find peace, and were now trapped within the walls of the Easter palace. Determined to put an end to the haunting, the group of friends gathered all the information they had gathered and made a plan. They returned to the Easter palace, armed with holy water, crosses, and other tools they hoped would help them banish the spirits. As they made their way through the palace, they could feel the weight of the spirits' presence growing stronger. But they didn't falter, knowing that they had to be strong and resolute. And finally, they came face to face with the ghostly figure that had chased them out. But this time, they were prepared. They began to chant ancient prayers, sprinkling holy water and holding up crosses. The ghostly figure let out a blood-curdling scream, but then began to fade away, slowly dissipating into the mist. As the last of the spirits disappeared, the Easter palace was filled with a warm, golden light. The stained glass windows were suddenly restored, the flowers in the garden bloomed with new life, and the air was filled with the scent of fresh baking bread. The group of friends knew that they had finally put the spirits to rest, and that the Easter palace would no longer be a place of darkness and terror. As they left the palace, they knew that they had faced their fears and triumphed over the supernatural, and that they would never forget the haunting, creepy Easter palace.